Today's episode is brought to you by the Breckham Group, a supply chain consulting firm built by operators and engineers, not just advisors. Their experienced team helps companies bridge the gap between strategy and execution inside distribution centers using a proven framework called Precision Supply Chain Operations. The result? Faster performance, greater efficiency, and real ROI. If you need speed, precision, and measurable results, visit breckhamgroup.com.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse, and I'm here in Linden, New Jersey. I'm at the Linden Logistics Center, and I'm standing next to the guy who is responsible for this center, Dave Greek of Greek Real Estate Partners. And we're going to find a little bit about this center, but we're also going to talk a little bit about the market. We're also going to talk a little bit about what goes into developing something like this. But Dave, first off, thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me.
Definitely.
Really excited to be on the podcast. Been a fan since you started, so
Thank
excited
you.
to be on.
Yeah, so happy we can make this full circle, and it turns out we actually live down the road from each other too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
happy we could connect and make this happen, especially in a warehouse like this, right? So tell us a little bit, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about Greek.
We're a third generation family company based in East Brunswick, New Jersey. My grandfather really started in the 1930s. He started off as a contractor. His first job was, $500 porch on someone's backyard.
Nice.
And then, continued to grow that business. In the 1950s or so, he started to buy property along with a partner and develop for himself. My dad went to Georgia Tech and then joined the Army for 4 years and came back to Jersey. He studied engineering, knew he wanted to be a builder, and kind of joined up with his dad in the mid-1960s. He moved our office from North Jersey down to East Brunswick, where we still are today. And really, since he took over, we've been focused on this product type, on industrial. So that is where, almost all of our time is spent. All of our development properties are industrial. We've grown a lot over the last 100 years. We manage about 22.5 million square feet of industrial. Almost all of that is located in New Jersey and Eastern Pennsylvania. So a very, very concentrated portfolio. And we're really proud of what we've grown into. My main role in the business is really, identifying, underwriting, and figuring out how we can acquire new opportunities. So I work with our acquisitions team to look at new development sites, look at other stabilized warehouses we could potentially buy for a good deal, and work with our equity and financial partners to figure out, how each deal is capitalized. We don't have any sort of fund or programmatic equity. So every deal that we do as a developer, we capitalize it individually. We've got, 5 or 6 really strong institutional and financial partners that will join us in the equity on deals, and a couple really good lending relationships as well. So every deal is a little different. This one that we're standing in today, it's really a perfect project to talk to you about because it checks every box of, what are the challenges of developing. The timing of the market cycle over the last 10 years has been really interesting. And this has lived through kind of all of that. Industrial in general has gone through kind of a fundamental shift in how important it is to the economy, especially here in New Jersey. And when we started this project, we acquired it between 2017 and 2018, which I'd say was, we could tell at that point that there was something happening, but we didn't know how big it was at that time. And if you look back at our, what we were looking at in terms of rents, in terms of the cost to build, in terms of the time it took to lease when we originally acquired this, things have changed a lot since then. And I feel like we've lived through like one or two cycles even since the start of this project.
Yeah.
Just because things are moving very quickly. The growth has been both explosive, and that's come with, especially over the last 18 months, some drawback and certainly a lot of public attention.
Yeah.
I started an advocacy group last year along with NIAP New Jersey called Circulate New Jersey that is addressing some of the concerns, I'd say, that the public has about just the massive amount of development that's gone on in this state over the last 10 years. Anytime something gets built to the scale that we've built out the industrial market in New Jersey, there's going to be some concerns from the public. And unfortunately, those concerns have been accompanied by the age of social media, which has allowed, a lot of disinformation, a lot of kind of disingenuous actors to spread information about the industry, our projects, and the importance of these to local and state economies. Circulate's just an attempt to try and be out in the public sphere and really provide the other side of that narrative, some of the good that this industry does for the state.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've seen, certainly I live in New Jersey, right? And there's been a huge boom, I think, in building, especially warehouses, right? And industrial type of things. And I come originally from a small town. So I've certainly seen a lot of that discourse happening on the local Facebook groups, signs, and, stop the warehouse and all these different things.
Yep.
So definitely interested to dive into that with you a little bit. And we'll walk around and talk a little bit about that. But let's talk a little bit about where we are, right? Linden Logistics Center, that's where we are. So tell us a little bit about this center, because I think there's 9 buildings here, is that right?
Yeah, I'm gonna go way back because this site has
let's take it back.
A really, really long industrial history. And look, I think it's important to note, New Jersey is kind of the oldest industrialized state in the US. We kind of started the Industrial Revolution here, and we're still the leading forefront of it. So not only is, this industry important to the state now, but it's always been a really integral part of our economy. The first industrial use of this site, and let me back up even further than 100 years. We're basically sitting on swampland for more or less right now, historically. And that describes most of the northern coast of New Jersey between, New York and New Jersey. A lot of it used to be marshland, swampland. This is not any different. And if you look right next door to us here, actually part of the property, there's a river that runs through.
Yeah, I saw some egrets in there. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, it's a great local environment. We're preserving that as part of this development.
Nice.
But that is what this entire coastline used to look like. So that comes with some building challenges. Obviously, the soils in a swamp are not, ideal to put a building on top of.
Not very stable.
And on top of that, the way that we, as a country, kind of fixed the swamps is by filling them with, all sorts of different fill, debris, rocks, trash, anything that we could kind of use to make land. So this site we're sitting on, it used to be swamp 200-300 years ago. As New Jersey industrialized in the 1800s, it started being filled with stuff and becoming dry land. In the late 1800s, a buffalo bone processing facility opened here.
Buffalo bone processing?
Yes. So,
I don't know what that is. What is that?
I didn't know what it was when I saw it at first either. Why would you want to process buffalo bones? But basically, if you know a little bit of American history, when the U.S. was expanding westward, massive buffalo hunts would occur, and they'd kill thousands and thousands of buffalo at a time, mostly for sport. There's great old pictures of just great, but also kind of horrifying, of just piles and piles, like pyramids of buffalo bones.
Wow.
From some of the sport shooting that went on during westward expansion. They would take that, which was largely, they considered it a kind of waste byproduct. They'd ship it back east, send it to a facility like was located here, grind up and dry the bones, which produce phosphate, which is an important fertilizer.
Okay.
So basically, they take that waste product from the west, process it here, sell it to farmers as fertilizer. And that operation lasted probably 30, 40 years here, more or less until we ran out of buffalo to process, because we basically killed off most of the entire population.
A lot of buffalo, yeah.
We did. That was replaced by a chemical dye operation that was run by a company called Chemours, which eventually became part of the Dow DuPont family of companies. The other portion of the site, which is the portion we're standing on now, in the late 1960s, was bought by GAF, which is the world's, I believe, largest roofing manufacturer.
Roofing, right? Yeah.
They manufactured basically most of the shingles that were produced in the U.S. out of this site for probably 20 to 30 years. Because of all that environmental history in the mid 80s, the site was shut down. The site sat vacant for a really, really long time. And in Linden, in this town, this used to be the largest employer for almost 50 years. Between those two factories, it employed about 5,000 to 6,000 people.
Yeah.
Which was, kind of the bulk of the working class in Linden. When it shut down, Linden itself kind of spiraled into depression that I'd say it is just starting to come out of now. This is a great location as well. I mean, I drive past it every day on the turnpike.
Yeah.
So do about 100,000 other people.
Close to New York, yeah.
It is close to New York. We've got about 1,000 feet of waterfront property here, which we expect at some point in the future will be activated into some sort of waterborne logistics use.
Okay.
We just needed to figure out how to build on top of all of that history, all the environmental baggage that came with it.
I mean, that's a big undertaking, right? So to go through. So, I mean, how do you work through that? How do you, because I think, probably a lot of people, and it sounds like, it took a long time, right? Since the 80s, it's been shut down, right? That, a lot of people probably look at it and say like, oh, we don't want to touch that, right? So how do you, as you guys, I mean, how do you decide like, okay, like this is a project that we can make viable? How do you go through that analysis and really understand, okay, yeah, we can do this and we can figure out how to make this work?
It's a really good question. It's a question we asked ourselves about 1,000 times a day when we were looking at this project. We have a partner. We actually have two partners on this project. Advanced Realty, which is another family-owned New Jersey development company, and PGIM, which is Prudential's real estate investment arm, also based here in New Jersey. So we've kind of got this all New Jersey team attacking this project. We don't bring in other developers to our projects a whole lot, but in this case, we approach the project together with Advanced because they have a little bit more experience and some people on their staff that have really good experience with environmental remediation, both on the legal side and on the problem solving side. So their knowledge of environmental law and the complexities that this site environmentally introduced to us, we thought that was a great pairing of expertise with our kind of industrial knowledge and our building knowledge. We were not the first developers to look at this site. We were actually the seventh. And the seventh developer to have it under contract. And I do want to, make clear that like with any business, but particularly with development, being in the right place at the right time can be 90% of someone's success.
Yeah.
And I think in this project, certainly that played a huge role. So the previous developer was trying to work through some approvals. It was taking them a very long time. Not only do you need approvals from the local municipality, you need county approvals, you need approvals from the DOT, the DEP, and for some instances, some work done with the Turnpike Authority and the Army Corps of Engineers. So there's a lot of different agencies that had jurisdiction over the site. The sellers got frustrated with the other developer and basically said, you're out of time. We don't want to wait for you to figure this process out any longer. We're going to pivot. And since we had the rear side under control and had kind of demonstrate both our ability to close and the expertise, which we kind of analyzed that site and went about and solving some of the problems, the sellers, the Winter family, basically pivoted immediately to us and said, if you can step into these shoes, you can basically take down this entire site. It was a win-win in many ways because it helped us solve a problem as well, which is we needed access to that rear lot, and the only way to get there was through this site. So that was one of the things we were trying to solve with the previous developer that was under contract that wasn't fully figured out yet. We've talked a lot about the environmental and kind of how that colored the acquisition, but there was also, a major infrastructure component of this that really had to start the project. So I've never had to build a bridge as part of an entrance to a project, so this was pretty unique, and I'm not sure I ever will again. But the reason we built it is because there's a very important rail line that runs kind of along the edge of our
I
site.
saw that out there. Yeah.
Yeah, it supplies a lot of fuel to Newark Airport for the jets, etc. But
Okay.
it's been a very active rail line for a long time, and that was causing some traffic issues on the entrance to our site because it drove right across the entrance. So in order to make sure that our tenants can get in and out of here as quickly and as efficiently as possible, we spent a lot of time, a lot of design dollars, and a lot of resources to build that bridge to fly over the tracks, just so that there's no question from any of our tenants that they'll ever have to stop and wait for a train to go by.
Yeah.
The name of the game in logistics is efficiency.
Speed. Yeah.
So just removing that one variable of maybe you have to wait 10 minutes for a train to pass, that was important enough for us to spend a lot of money to build that bridge. It's been successful in terms of never during any lease in this project has anyone asked about the train. That solves the problem.
Absolutely. And I think super interesting to hear kind of what goes into a project like this, because it's not just one building here, it's 9 buildings. So you're building an entire center, as it's called, right? And so there's a lot of things that go into that. It's like building a small town almost in a sense, right? You're building roads, building bridges in this case, and then worrying about, the natural environment around it as well, which I think is a great thing. And, being able to do that, I think really kind of gives you an idea of like what goes into, even though like essentially this is a big box, right?
Yes, it is.
A lot goes into making this big box just exist in the first place. So very interesting to hear that. Now tell us a little bit, because you got 9 buildings. How much square footage is here?
About 4 million square feet here.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We have one building left to build, which is all the way in the rear of the site. Other than that, we've built out our entire program more or less. Hopefully we'll start building that last building soon and finish it up. As your viewers can see, we're standing in vacant space right now.
Yeah.
So
if you're looking for space,
if you're looking for space, give me a call. We've got some available here. I'd say we delivered quite a bit of space in 23 and 24, and I've been working very hard to lease that up. We'll touch on the market probably a little later in this podcast, but the market over the last 12 months has been changing. It's been different. There's been less tenants in the market. There's been more availabilities of space. And so, I'd say this phase of the project has taken longer to lease than any of the previous phases, which has been a little frustrating. But I'd say, when we set up this interview, this building was completely vacant. That wasn't that long ago.
And now you got somebody leasing, right?
If you hear some echoes, some noise in the background, that's because we have a tenant moving in right next to us here. So I'm proud to say we've leased a portion of this building. It's also, I think, a sign of what's to come. There was a lot of optimism about leasing velocity coming into 2025. I think tariffs and trade uncertainty have dampened that a little bit, but we're starting to see the signs that this is a resurging and recovering market, and that it is that the balance of supply demand is getting to a much healthier spot now. So we're very bullish on leasing the rest of the space and hopefully getting started on our last building.
Yeah.
Hopefully as soon as next year. Being in the development business for as long as my family has, this is a really once in a century type opportunity. You don't find well-located, contiguous acreage like this very often in our state.
Yeah.
Just given its age and its population density and some of the unique challenges of developing here. Addressing one of the questions you asked earlier is like, how did you see this site and kind of see the vision for it? Well, when you see 400 acres in a great industrial location, it's really hard to ignore in our state. And even with all of the history and all the challenges and having to build a bridge and deal with this underground bathtub containment system, you can't ignore 400 acres of great located land. So we kind of saw that, and we pushed through those problems, and we learned a lot. We didn't know the solutions to every one of those problems, and in some cases there wasn't a playbook to tap into and say, this is how you solve these problems. We knew the opportunity here was big enough and the upside was high enough where we could take the time and expense to learn and figure it out as we went.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the park is beautiful. The buildings look great. I took a little drive around when I was trying to find my find my way here, so got to see a little bit. But really interesting to hear what goes into just developing something like this, right? I mean, I think oftentimes we probably think like, oh, there's throw up some walls, put a ceiling on it, and that's a warehouse basically, right? But all of that work going into it, and especially in these areas that are in high demand, right? I mean, we're super close to New York City, right? And we have one of the most densely populated areas right here, right, in the country, right? A lot of population. So obviously high demand to be able to get to that. So super interesting to hear what's gone into this project and how it's developed over time, and still developing too, with one building left to go. And we'd be very interested to see what that looks like when it's done, and we can check it out because we're close by. But
come back
really,
anytime.
Yeah, definitely. So really interesting to learn about this. But why don't we maybe take a walk around the building here, and let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the real estate market for warehousing, industrial specifically.
Sounds good.
All right, so we learned a little bit about the Linden Logistics Center here and what has gone into just developing this project overall. And I got to say kudos to Dave and his partners and everybody involved to making this happen. But let's find out from Dave here a little bit about the market itself, like what's happening in the market. So let's walk through the building a little bit as we do this.
We can walk and talk. So as I mentioned, we acquired this site and really started working on it 2017, 2018. That was, at that time, we were, I'd say, recovered mostly from the great financial crisis of 2008 and on an upward trajectory generally. But to give you a sense of how much things have changed since we acquired the site, our original underwriting showed about $10 rents at this location, which at the time we thought was pretty aggressive given what the comp set was.
Yeah.
Recently, we've been signing leases in the 18 and 19s.
Yeah, I was going to say 10 is pretty low right now.
It is very low, and we would not take a $10 deal today.
Yeah.
But the first leases in this park were in the 12s, and by the time we got to the second generation of leases, we were in the 19s. So I think that's an example of just how quickly things changed in this market, how much demand there was. One of the main drivers of that demand during this project in particular was COVID.
Yeah, absolutely.
It definitely changed the entire landscape of logistics, not just for that time when we were in pandemic lockdowns, but I think forever. So there was a trend in the industry in general that was called just-in-time inventory management. You did inventory management, I know, so you probably know what that means. But basically, it means you're keeping less inventory on hand and using technology to tell you exactly when demand is going to happen so you can stock your warehouses with just what you need to distribute and not really have any of this excess inventory that takes up space and costs money to store. When that system hit the black swan that was a global pandemic, it broke. It broke really dramatically. And that's why early days of COVID, most households were talking about logistics over the dinner table.
Yeah.
I don't think there's ever been a point in U.S. history where this happened. Maybe World War II. But the fact that people were talking about problems in the supply chain and using the word logistics, and there was a visceral fear at that time. I remember it pretty well. People were running to the store, remember the run on toilet paper, right?
Oh yeah, of course.
And that really kick-started some of the discussion around, okay, so what's so broken about our supply chain that we can't supply toilet paper? I mean, that seems like a pretty basic good.
Yeah.
The logistics industry learned a lot from that. And I think they learned that there's only so much you can do with a just-in-time inventory management system, that it can manage for good times, but it can't really manage for those unforeseen events that can really shake up what you thought was a pretty secure distribution system. So we've seen generally size requirements grow since then. People are keeping a little bit more inventory on hand, and they're managing a little bit more for the unknown rather than just what's for maximal efficiency. As we said before, most of logistics is about making sure everything's maximally efficient.
Right.
But there's also a component of it that has to try and account for the unforecastable. And I think that's a major thing that we learned as an industry during COVID. The results on the ground, the results on the market, though, were a mad rush for space, basically. After the first couple months of kind of learning what our problems in the supply chain were,
Yeah.
The industry quickly realized that there's only really one way to keep the economy running during a time where everyone had to stay home, and that's move what was kind of left of the traditional retail world online. And so that created just this massive demand for new industrial space from traditional tenants, as well as from a lot of new entrants to logistics space, and pulled forward the growth that we expected from e-commerce. I've seen estimates between 8 and 12 years of how much demand was pulled forward in 2020 and 2021.
Yeah.
So right now, e-commerce makes up about 30% of total retail.
Okay.
The general expectation is that it'll grow to 50% eventually and probably cap out around there. We saw probably between 6 and 7% growth just between 2020 and 2025 in terms of the adoption of e-commerce. And that really was just fuel on the fire of demand for industrial space. So that caused rents to really start to go on this, parabolic upward curve for a while there, where you just could not build space fast enough. We had situations where we had a vacant building standing, we're almost ready to deliver, and 5 or 6 tenants, basically in a bidding war to lease the space.
Oh, wow.
2 or 3 of them had ships, waiting, loaded with
For that
goods.
space, yeah.
Right. They just needed a space to put them. And so there was a kind of a sense of desperation from a lot of these tenants that just like, we don't care about the flaws. We don't care about the economics. We need space now.
Yeah.
And that just lit the market on fire. And we benefited from that a lot here, but I'd say the overall market really, really grew by nature of that sentiment at that time. And some of what we see today, which is kind of what I call a bit of a hangover from that kind of exuberance of that period, is, what you'll see in any economic cycle, which is somebody taking that short period of explosive growth and extrapolating it to 10 years. And so there was a lot of investment within the industrial space based on rents growing at 10% for 6 or 7 years in a row. And, we all know real estate's cyclical. Rent growth it goes up and down, and sometimes it goes negative. So while this upward trajectory, this last market cycle lasted a lot longer than it typically would, I'd say, we were on an upward cycle from about 2011 to about 2024. Most real estate cycles take 6 or 7 years. This one took 13 to 14.
Yeah.
I think that gave some investors this false sense of security that, this time is different and this time it'll last forever.
It's gonna last longer, yeah.
And pair that with, some big secular changes in the economy, like adoption of e-commerce, which we know is a 30, 40-year trend, and some of that demand being pulled forward during COVID. It definitely, all those factors lined up in just the right way to make investors super hungry and really just want more and more exposure to this asset class. So pricing, got to be really, really high. Most things were, priced to perfection, meaning there really wasn't any profit for landlords to make unless the market grew. And you'll see a lot of the struggles that you'll see today are just a result of that time period, that way of thinking about industrial real estate values. And today's world is very different, right? After this kind of period of exuberance where, there's 5 people waiting in line to lease a vacant warehouse, interest rates started to rise. That was kind of a signal to both the real estate and the tenant community that things were changing and that this was not going to last forever. And at the same time, consumer demand started to both change and decline. And one of the main ways it changed after COVID was a lot of the investment dollars that average consumers were spending during COVID was in their home.
Right.
It was on that honey-do list. It's on that home project that they've been waiting to do for 6 years, but now they're finally stuck at home and they can finally do it. So we had lots of demand from groups like Home Depot or building supply companies, people selling washing machines, dryers, dishwashing machines, these large utilities that you purchase every 5 to 10 years, usually, that is not like an everyday thing you buy. And that was what a lot of the demand that we saw during COVID was, exactly those types of companies. When that demand started to pull back, a lot of those companies realized that they had taken on too much space, that they had made the same mistake the investor community had made, and said, this demand for washing machines is going to last for 10 years. In reality, the demand spike they saw in 21 and 22 actually kind of cannibalized their business for the next 3 or 4 years. The people that bought washers, dryers in 21 are not going to buy one in 23.
Yeah.
They're going to buy one in 32.
Yeah.
So a lot of those companies realized they had too much space and started to give it back. And that either came through the form of mostly sublease. A lot of large blocks of space that have been leased relatively recently, 21, 22, came back for sublease. Honestly, we've had a few tenants in this park do the exact same thing.
Oh, yeah.
Where we leased some space in 21, in one instance, from the time they toured the space to the time they moved in, it was less than 30 days. Just to give you a sense of the kind of the urgency needed at that time. Within a year and a half of taking occupancy, the tenant put the entire space on the sublease market because they realized that they had made a mistake in terms of what demand they were forecasting for their products. That sublease has since filled, and that's the general narrative over the last 12 months, is kind of this recovery of the supply-demand balance. Subleasing has a big part to do with that, but so does new space deliveries. So you pair those two together. One of the nice parts about investing and building industrial is that you can build these buildings relatively quickly. I do hate when people call them erector sets, but like the truth is that, to most people looking in from the outside, they are. And if you've ever seen one of these buildings actually constructed, the way that we do it is a method called tilt-up construction, which basically means that we pour the floors first. We set out wooden forms along the edge and pour the walls onto the floors. And then we take a big crane and roll it around the outside of the buildings and pick up those panels and stick them into place. So while there's, months and months of work that go into setting it up for that pick, what the public sees is, 1 week there's a flat site, and 2 weeks later there's basically a fully erected building. And what is that if not an erector set, right? So a lot of the development decisions and the complexities, particularly on this site, actually happen under the ground, underneath where we're standing now. The building we're in, I'd say, is a very standard Greek industrial asset. It is Class A. It's 40-foot clear. We've got our standard steel columns, our great concrete floors, and stick-on insulation along the walls to give a little bit of extra insulation during the summer and the winter time. Over the course of 30 years, we kind of came in on the tail end of this and finished this. A lot of fill was brought into the site to bring it above the floodplain. Overall, the site was elevated about between 14 and 16 feet on average across about 400 acres. So I can't do that math, but that's a lot of dirt. And that took about 20 years to actually fulfill. So we really came in on the tail end. The site has taken fill from anyone who can generate fill, including, when they were cleaning up the spoils of 9/11, some of those spoils came to this site. We had a protocol, because we had some 9/11 debris on the site, to say, if you find anything that looks a little suspicious, you call the police. This is going to sound scary, but stick with me. We found 9 sets of bones when we were digging through the site. We called the police every single time. They all turned out to be deer bones. Thank God. But, that just gives you some of the sense of like the history, the complexity of the site. It's not just, you come in here and you build an erector set. You have to be conscious of that history and then often solve the problems that history introduced. We need to do a couple different forms of ground improvement systems to make sure that this dirt would hold up. We used 2. A combination of deep dynamic compaction, which is basically just putting a really heavy weight on top of the earth and letting time and gravity do the work of improving the soil conditions.
Make it kind of denser, right?
Yeah, just weigh it down and condense it. And that takes a little bit of time. Some are, depending on the types of soils you're working with, can take anywhere between 4 months to a year for that to complete. The other method we use is called controlled modulus columns, which is a little more complicated, a little more work intensive. Basically, you drill a hole between 20 and 40 feet underground, and you backfill that with grout. As that grout cures, it expands a little bit. And if you drill a series of these holes in kind of a pattern, that expanding grout pushes the soils together and kind of creates this improved system. So that's the system we use mostly across. Majority of these buildings are built on controlled modulus columns or CMCs. But if you think about how that system works, it's actually pushing soil laterally in order to improve its strength. Pair that with the idea that there's an underground wall system keeping groundwater in, and now we're adding pressure to push against that wall. I referred to this like abstractly earlier, but this was an engineering problem that hadn't ever been dealt with before. Like nobody had actually built CMC columns next to this underground secant wall and been able to figure out, how to do that. So it's very wonky. Some of the developers watching this might appreciate it, but that's a problem that we had to kind of get comfortable solving with our team of engineers. That just, we're very confident this will work, but we kind of had to build it and test it first. And thankfully, our calculations were correct. Everything worked out. But there's been a few of those kind of nerve-wracking moments throughout this project of like, well, there's not really a playbook we can point to or a guy I can call that's done this before. We have to figure it out on our own and innovate sometimes to really solve some problems.
Very interesting. I mean, it's just kind of all these different layers and layers that go into putting this building together and getting this standing up and being able to be viable for all of that commerce that you're referring to before, whether it's moving goods for retailers, moving for e-commerce or other means. I mean, really interesting to hear what goes into that. But let's shift gears a little bit, because this is something that you're, I think, kind of passionate about and you work on, right? I mean, there is, and I'll say particularly here in New Jersey, we touched on this a little bit earlier, right? There is some I guess local towns that are the town's people or the people that live there are kind of against seeing this industrial development. I know where I'm from originally, down in Burlington County, there's a lot of farms that are being turned into big warehouses, and people are very much against that. But tell us a little bit about what's going on there and what's the real story.
Sure. It was good that you're from Burlington, because I'd say Burlington is kind of the epicenter of where some of these issues started.
Oh yeah. I've seen some crazy signs about warehouses in like my hometown. Yeah.
And I will say, particularly with some of the stuff that happened 9-10 years ago in Burlington, like some of this public outrage, so to speak, is justified. Not every industrial project that's been built in New Jersey should have been built. And not every project that has been built was built with the right design or the right consideration for their neighbors and the community around it. But most have. And my peers and my company, I think those are things we pay a lot of attention to. One of the reasons we have to pay attention to it is just the entitlement process here in New Jersey involves, I mentioned there's 5 different government agencies that have some sort of say over what can be built on this site. So there's a lot of touch points with different types of professionals that you have to work your way through when you're developing in New Jersey. But beyond just touch points with government agencies, the public plays a really important role in the approval process in New Jersey, and probably plays a bigger role here than really almost anywhere else in the US. The public has the right to comment on these plans, and they have access to these local officials who get the right to, say yes or no to whether we get to build something. So that's been really one of the main reasons why Circulate New Jersey started, was because, what the public thinks about this industry plays a really critical role in our ability to grow. And if we are seen as the bad guys, if we are seen as not doing good, but really paving over the state with concrete and asphalt, which is the way a lot of people see our industry, we're not going to be able to service our tenants. We're not going to be able to grow this industry in the state. And that became an increasing problem, particularly, during COVID. But this has always been an issue in New Jersey. I just say the increased public attention that the industry got during COVID, that kind of becoming a dinner time topic of conversation.
Yeah.
It helped in some ways and educated people about the importance of logistics, but it also, brought to the forefront some of the concerns that a lot of people have about the impacts that trucks have on communities, the impacts that these, what these jobs are and whether they're good jobs or bad jobs. There was a lot of questions in the public sphere about it. Facebook really created the perfect kind of cauldron for misinformation and anger to really be the driving force behind some of the objections behind what we're doing. And developers, property owners, and our tenants, truckers, logistics companies, they were getting very frustrated by this because it was impacting the way politicians spoke about the industry, was impacting every time we went in for a planning board or a site plan hearing. In some instances, we'd get crowds of, 100, 200 people showing up with, literally pitchforks and torches in some instances. So
down in the farmland.
Yeah. So
sure.
there was, it's like I said, industrial developers. My family's been in the business for a very long time. I can tell you, we've never been popular per se with the public, but the amount of kind of outrage that we were seeing recently was to a different level, and the organization was to a different level. So there was this need within the industry to react and to do something about it. And we are not very good in the real estate industry at public relations in general. Just not something the industry has ever really paid too much attention to. We need to pay attention now. We started out in last fall. We hired a communications firm called Evoke, who's done a great job trying to get our message out there. I think the most important thing that we've done so far is simply bring together a whole bunch of different aspects of this industry under one coalition. So I've been a member of NIOP for a very long time. NIOP represents the real estate side of this community, the developers, the property owners, less so our tenants, less so the truckers, not really at all the port. We were able to, using Circulate as a platform, kind of bring everyone under one roof. So we've got major occupiers, we've got multiple trucking associations, we've got the port, and we've got contractors, attorneys, brokers, and developers like myself. All these different industries that really play an important role within the larger universe of logistics. There was not a single organizing force that was making all those voices speak in unison. And even within the trucking world itself, there's about 25 different trucking organizations that just operate in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Most of them don't talk to each other. Most of them don't coordinate public messaging. And certainly when it comes to a piece of legislation in Trenton, it's 25 different approaches to how to influence that and how to fight, negative legislation or encourage positive legislation. So I think Circulate did a massive good for the industry just in bringing people into a single room and having us communicate and coordinate strategy together. You'll see the messaging that Circulate puts out is very much focused on the industry as a whole. It's not focused on just the real estate side or just the trucking logistics side. We see this as an ecosystem, and that's really how we came up with the name Circulate. We kind of view logistics as the lifeblood of New Jersey. It's what makes everything work. It's what gets things from A to B. Right. And it's what keeps the rest of our system healthy and operational. So we really wanted to evoke this idea of a beating heart and the flow of goods around the economy, as well as just how interconnected it is to every bit of everyday life here.
Interesting. Yeah. And I love that. Kind of like the circulatory system of commerce in a sense, right?
Exactly.
And I think it's such an interesting conversation because, being from that area, I've obviously seen some of the stuff like you've talked about. But also, it's interesting, like somebody asked me one time, that I knew from there, like growing up, and they're like, how do you feel about this? Because it's like, it's like your business, right? It's what you do,
Yeah.
and it is kind of like, a mixed bag a little bit. But I think it's interesting because there's people that obviously they don't want to see like a warehouse from their house, right, or from their backyard. But at the same time, it's the consumer, which are those residents, right, that's kind of driving for faster accessibility to product, whether it's in store, whether it's e-commerce and all those
Yeah.
things. And in order to do that, you have to get closer to that population center, right, to be able to do that. So I think it's a very interesting thing. And I love that you're creating more awareness around that and being able to help people understand that, like, hey, like this is a big part of business, right? And
Yeah.
and it does, create jobs and create entry level jobs as well that more people can get access to and things like that. So it's a really interesting discussion around that, and I think it'll be interesting to see like how that continues to evolve because we're just getting closer and closer to the consumer, right?
Exactly. And I appreciate your kind of nuanced approach to this, and I think that Circulate is trying to do the same thing. And it's something that kind of eternally angers me about some of what, particularly some of what the environmentalist groups have done in terms of creating misinformation or creating a narrative out of a very flimsy set of facts that when you actually look into those facts don't line up with reality. And they're doing it out of a place of activism, out of trying to spread a message, but in my opinion, in a very disingenuous way. Circulate is trying to approach things a little differently. I tell our team all the time, we do not want to gaslight the people in New Jersey. We want to tell them facts. We don't want to spin the narrative too much where it becomes just a story and not the reality of things. And I don't think we need to either. There, like I said, not every single logistics development is going to be one that's positive for the community, and not every single one of them that have been approved for the last 10 years should. I think a lot of other industry advocate organizations wouldn't say something like that, but I'm happy to say it.
Yeah.
We want to support good, sustainable economic development in the state. This is a good example of that, and really the perfect example of a site that couldn't be anything else.
Yeah, it was not usable, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And we'll hear that often as a complaint against our projects that, hey, we know these are not the prettiest buildings. I will say they've gotten a lot prettier in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
A lot more attention on aesthetics and on those storefront entrances and making sure that they're appealing to both the people that work there and the community that they're set in. But they are big boxes. And when you have a space this size, this is a 472,000 foot building we're standing in. This is considered a mid-size industrial building these days.
Yeah.
Big ones are over 1 million square feet. Anything that is less than this is considered relatively small. When you're building a structure that big, it's going to look out of place in a lot of places.
Yeah.
Next to the scale of a house, it's going to look enormous. And so part of the benefit of having some of the massive public involvement we have in the planning process here is like we can learn lessons from the public and we can do things better, and we have been. So the amount of public the amount of landscape screening that goes around new projects is tenfold what it used to be 10 years ago.
So great work that Circulate is doing to be able to do that and create that awareness for our industry, because we are kind of that lifeblood of a lot of things. That's how you get things to your house. That's how you get things in the store. That's how you get medical supplies to the hospital, right?
Yep.
All these different things that are critical. We need spaces like this to be able to facilitate that and make that happen. So really interesting to talk with you here today, Dave. And thanks for having me in this project and checking it out. Always love to see a nice warehouse, right? And one that's ready for you guys to come in and move into as well. But if people want to learn more about your company, want to learn more about Circulate, what's the best way to do that and get in touch?
For Greek real estate, just go to GreekREP.com, GreekRealEstatePartners.com to learn about our business and some of the other large projects we have going on across the state. Circulate is a member-funded organization and very much member-driven. So if you have if you have an interest in getting involved, whether that's just to learn more information or actually get involved in helping us spread this message, please feel free to reach out, and we will get you all the information you need to get involved. So thank you for having me today, Kevin. I think this was a great interview, and hopefully we get another opportunity to talk about something interesting in the near future.
Definitely, absolutely. So thanks to Dave for bringing us in and allowing us to see this project and learn about everything that went into it. Pretty wild, I gotta say, but really very interesting to hear all about this, what goes into making a logistics center like this possible, and also what's happening in the market as well. So we'll definitely put all that information about Dave so you can get in touch with him or circulate if you're interested in getting involved in the show notes, as well as at thenewwarehouse.com. So thanks again, Dave, for having me here at your project.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.